Today I want to talk about something that some people might have curiosity about. Why do I dress the way I do? Now, some of you might be watching my videos and be like, what are you talking about? How do you dress any differently? But for a lot of people that have known me all through the years, there's been a unique change in how I dress compared to the way I used to be. I used to be that guy that was in shorts. Once it was 60 degrees Celsius outside, boom, the shorts came on, I was good to go. I was in a t-shirt. I was one of those, your typical youth today that you're outside wearing almost nothing and it's freezing out there. Even when I was older, in my 30s, I worked in a hospital, and people always thought it was really strange. I would have shorts on and a short sleeve shirt and it'd be minus 40 outside. But that's outside, I'm inside, but people still thought I was strange for wearing shorts at that time. But I was always hot, and I didn't quite understand why I was always hot, but I do now. Even when I was really young, I remember I had a cousin that needed some help on his farm, and they were haying, and they asked my family if we'd come and help, and we said, sure, yeah, we'll go and help. And I remember my dad saying, you need a long sleeve shirt. And I'm like, no, I don't. And he's like, yeah, you're going to really regret it if you do. I'm like, no, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. And I remember getting there, and then my cousin and some other people, they're like, you can't do it with short sleeve shirts on, you have to wear long sleeves. Farmers wear long sleeves, it's not a work for short sleeves. And I was like, I'll be fine. And I didn't care how cut up and scratched up my arms got and stuff like that. I didn't really think, that was hurting me, which it was, but I didn't understand that. I'm like, I'm going to be so hot if I don't. I'm always hot anyway. Although my hands and my feet would always freeze. It's really unusual. Hot, cold hands, cold feet. It's not so unusual, but over years of doing stuff like that, it caused slight health issues because of how I dressed. There was even this one time, I was always so warm. I remember in the winter time, we're going to go to the in-laws for Christmas. And every year we'd go, and I'd get there, and they'd have a fire going, and it'd be about 27 degrees inside the place. And I'd just be roasting, and I'd be sick and nauseous. Didn't help that I ate too much, and I wasn't eating healthy food, more so. I guess it wasn't unhealthy food, but mostly made way too much of it. And when you eat, your body takes that food, and it burns it, and it creates heat. It's just like how a car runs, that's how our body runs. That's the fuel, it takes it, it burns it, and it creates heat. So there was one year I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start wearing long sleeves, like pants and a long sleeve shirt all the time. Because at home, as soon as when I got home from work, instantly I went in shorts and I was in a short sleeve shirt. It didn't matter when, where, whatever time of year. That was usually what I did. I didn't even really need to own pants except for just going outside in the winter. And I probably didn't have any long sleeve shirts except for dress shirts. So I thought, I'm going to prepare myself. I'm going to start wearing this stuff at home. So that way when I go, I'm going to enjoy Christmas a whole lot more. And maybe I won't have to bring my shorts and my t-shirt, which were essentially my pajamas, to their place for Christmas. And that way I would just enjoy it a whole lot more. So I started wearing the long sleeves. And then when I got there, I wasn't hot, and if it actually wasn't hot, 27 degrees, if the temperature dropped to 21 degrees, I'd actually be kind of cold. I'm like, what's going on? What's wrong with me? Now I understood why at 27 degrees, sometimes they'd even be putting on sweaters. And I couldn't figure it out. And then one time, when I joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I had somebody that gave me some CDs. And on these CDs, it talked about wearing long sleeve clothing. And I thought, I listened to it and I thought that was pretty interesting. And I went through some health aspects and health principles. And they also gave me a CD on suspenders. That's the other thing that I do that's a little different. But I'll still talk about the long sleeves at first. I did a lot of camping. And for a long time, I'd be struggling with the temperatures while camping, and I didn't quite understand what was going on. And then I started wearing less on my core and not bundling myself up, and I started feeling a little bit warmer. And I was like, in the cold weather, especially, if it's getting close to winter camping. And I started understanding different things about how to dress for camping so that I'd be warmer and not cold. And when I listened to these CDs that I got, and all of a sudden these things started all making sense to me. And after working in construction for a few years, just the idea of insulating a house made a whole lot more sense. If you want to keep a house cool, what do? You insulate it. If you want to keep it warm, what do? You insulate it. So, with the long sleeves, I insulate. It keeps my body at a regular temperature. It keeps it more even. It's not so susceptible to fluctuation. And as I did these things, I felt a little bit better. Now, a lot of people will think, well, that's good in the wintertime, but in the summertime, it's so hot. And when your sweat evaporates, and that's what cools you off. And yes, while you can have sweat on you and it evaporates, you feel cooler, but I have yet to be any warmer than a person that's outside. I can go outside and somebody will say to me, they're like, oh, are you not hot? It's so hot out here. I say, yeah, I'm just as hot. I'm hot too. There's not any difference between me and you, except for the fact that my skin's not burning. Like, if you're not wearing long sleeves, your skin literally cooks on you. So therefore, by wearing long sleeves, my skin doesn't literally cook on me, and therefore I am actually cooler than the other person, even though they might be sweating and it feels cool. It's not actually helping them. And something to remember too, when you wear long clothes, you don't evaporate so much moisture at the same time, so you dehydrate a lot less quickly than somebody who's not wearing long sleeves. And then when you sweat, we also know that toxins come out of your body. So if you're wearing short sleeves and you're sweating, the toxins come out, and yeah, you might have sweat drip off of you, but what happens is it re-dries on you and you just reabsorb a lot of those toxins again. But if you're wearing a shirt, then your toxins absorb into your shirt, you take it off that day, you wash it, and then a lot of those toxins are going. So there's a lot of different ideas and things that happen with wearing long sleeve clothing. But I want to talk more about circulation, because I had a lot of health issues. I used to have severe sleep apnea. And one of the things that I realized was happening when I started doing this dress reform, including the suspenders, these were a key part to it, is that my sleep apnea was going away. By incorporating these principles and eating healthier than I did, and I ate fairly healthy already, my sleep apnea went away. And I no longer had to worry about any of these problems that come with the sleep apnea that used to drive my now ex-wife crazy with my mask. I slept with a CPAP machine for 7 years. I couldn't go anywhere without it. I had almost died twice before I got onto the CPAP machine. I realized I was having some troubles when I woke up twice and my nose and my mouth were full of vomit, and I wasn't struggling to breathe. I just woke up and then I'd start coughing and sputtering and stuff like that, and I'm like, what's going on? There's something really wrong. So twice I nearly died, and I thought, I need to go to the hospital and find out what's going on, because there were some strange things that were going on that I couldn't explain or understand. What I didn't realize is that I was having a huge lack of oxygen. I was not actually sleeping, and my brain and my memory were not working so well. It was to the point where when I'd be driving to work, I didn't know why. If I drove for more than half an hour, I would fall asleep behind the wheel of the vehicle. And as many people with sleep apnea, they find little tricks to help keep themselves awake. I remember reading this one story of about a lady. She had a sunroof, and she'd put her ponytail in the sunroof, and every time she'd fall asleep, it'd yank her head up, and she'd look at the road again, and that's how she'd keep awake while driving. Not very safe, but your brain's not working enough to think that's not very safe. So for me, my car would always pull to the right. It never pulled into traffic, it always pulled to the right. And at that half-hour mark where I'd always fall asleep, I would be on my way to work, and there was a nice, big, long, open field right up near Haley Station. If anybody knows where that is and is listening to this, that knows Pembroke and Renfrew area. And I just close my eyes and go to sleep. And I only needed sleep for, I don't know, 10 seconds, and then I could make the rest of the drive. So I closed my eyes, I'd fall asleep, and when it started getting rough as I started getting into the field, I'd wake up, drive back on the road, and away I go again. And I drove at a time of day, mostly when there'd be no vehicles on the road, hardly. It was just unusual times of the day where I would be going and there was like almost no vehicles. Later on in years, there was a lot more traffic on that road, and I wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have had to pull over, sleep for a few minutes, and then go. So I finally got in, and I thought, I'm going to have a sleep study done. And they did the sleep studies at the hospital where I worked. So Rachel, who was the nurse that was doing these things, I knew her. And I remember going in for a sleep test, and I remember waking up in the morning. And it's one of those tests where, where they have this, they have the IV pole with all the wires and stuff that they're going to stick on you, and you're just covered with wires. And as anybody that has sleep apnea, it doesn't matter. You can be covered with all this stuff, and then you go to sleep, and it doesn't bother you because you're so tired, your body just shuts down, and you sleep well anyway, for people that are sleep deprived. So when I woke up in the morning, the first thing she did was she came in and says, Matt, I had no idea you could be so bad. My oxygen levels would drop to 72% that night. For me, that felt like a good night's sleep. So I don't know what they might have dropped on other days, if it would have went lower, higher. Obviously, if I almost died 2 different times, it probably would have been much lower than that. Anything below 70% is very life endangering. So she didn't come in to wake me up, which, has happened with a few patients where they're that bad, they got to come in and physically wake them up so that they don't die on them right then and there. But she did say that I was going to be a dead newlywed very soon if I didn't get a machine, and within a week I was on a machine, and that helped dramatically. So back to the clothing. So all of a sudden I started adopting this dress reform. I started wearing suspenders because suspenders, what it does is you carry all the weight of everything from your shoulders, which helps, but you don't have to have a belt that is so tight that it cuts off the circulation to your body or impedes the circulation. I'd often see those guys that are walking around on the streets, and the guys that are wearing their pants down and it's not to their waist and it's just kind of, on their buttocks, below their buttocks or whatever. I finally understand why those guys do it. It is so freeing and feels so good not to have a tight belt on or pants that are tight enough that you don't need a belt. So as soon as when I started wearing suspenders, I was like, wow. And anytime I wore a pair of pants that was a little snugger and I started driving, I'd start feeling uncomfortable and I'd have to open up my pants and then be like, oh, that feels so good. So anybody out there that's thinking, I'm crazy about the circulation, if you're driving for an hour or two, I just want you, if you're by yourself, your wife can be with you or whatever, and she might laugh at you for doing that, but just unbutton your pants, undo your zipper, and just drive like that and see how it feels. And if you're on a long drive, drive for like an hour like that, do it back up, drive for a little while, and feel the difference, and then undo it, and then just feel the relief. It's just like instant relief, and you just feel so much better. So by not having anything tight on me, my circulation started flowing better. Now, the long sleeves also does that, because what happens when your body is trying to get your circulation through your whole body, it's like a thermostat where it's like, hey, if this room in the house is cool, it's like having thermostats in a bunch of different rooms in the house. So if I have a thermostat in this room and I have a thermostat in that room and this room and that room, and all the windows are closed, when the heat goes on, all the rooms will come up and will sit and hover around the same temperature. But if you open a window in one of those rooms, that room will get cold, and then all of a sudden the furnace will have to run and run and run, but it's trying to heat this room, and these rooms are getting superheated while that room's getting cold. So there's an experiment that you can do for this as well. If you're going to bed at night, just try putting on, if you don't have pajamas, put on a pair of jogging pants, or if you have long sleeve, like a sweater or something like that, just pull up one sleeve or pull up one pant leg and then go to sleep. And a few hours later, you might wake up, or you might wake up in the morning, you'll find it down because unconsciously you pull it down, or you pull down your pant leg. But if you wake up, you'll feel that section cold. your leg cold or your arm cold. Whatever's uncovered will be cold, even though you're underneath all these blankets. And even if it's just a thin little layer, it's amazing the difference it makes. Even my blankets, if my quilt pulls down a little bit, I'll be toasty warm, but I'll feel a difference in temperature from where my quilt pulled down and the rest of my blankets are. Your body can tell the difference. And it's like your body's this one big thermostat trying to keep even circulation and trying to keep even heat everywhere. So by doing these things, your body will keep an even temperature. And then that helps in healing, it helps in sleeping. You have a much better sleep when your body's not trying to fight and do all these things. And if you're partially clothed or something's going on, then your body has to superheat. And you might think that you're warm because your head's closer to your chest than your arms are and then your legs are. So when your body superheats, your head will feel warm, so you're going to feel warmer, especially in the summertime. People that think that they're hot, right? They're not wearing the sleeves. They're feeling hotter because their body superheats, their head gets really warm, and it's trying to push, it's trying to take all the, it's just trying to even out the temperature everywhere. But in order to do that, we need to realize that your body has to work. You eat food which creates heat, and then that heat is what makes your body work. So the harder you work, the more heat your body needs, the more food it needs, and that makes you warmer. So also, if your body's trying to keep your temperature even throughout your body has to work to do that by pumping your blood through your system rapidly to keep all the extremities at the same temperature as your core. But one of the blessings about wearing long sleeves all the time is I'm always prepared for almost anything that is out there. If it starts getting a little cooler, I stay a little bit warmer. If it starts to get a little hot, I'm sheltered from the sun. It's like being in the shade all the time. Now, we also have to recognize that if I'm wearing like a black shirt, my skin can still burn underneath that black shirt. That black shirt will still get hot enough that it can still burn my skin. So if you wear lighter clothes, it's like being in the shade underneath a nice big tree like this one, and you're not near as hot because your body is shaded from the sun, and especially if you're wearing white, it reflects the sun, and then you just feel so much cooler. And you might say, well, I have white skin and that reflects it. But if your skin's burning, it's not reflecting it enough. Because if you're wearing long sleeves, it's impossible for your skin to burn if you're wearing lighter colors. It can still burn if you're wearing dark colors. I remember I had a friend, she had black jeans on, and she was sitting out in the sun for a long time, and she says, oh, I got burnt. So yeah, it can still burn. It's like, sticking an egg on asphalt. It will cook. But if you're to put it on a white piece of metal out there, that egg's not going to cook in the sun. It might harden and crust over, but it's not going to cook in the same way. So now I want to talk about the spiritual aspect of it. And this is something that is not really seen, and I'm not going to say it's been lost sight of. Well, I suppose that way back, in the days of the patriarchs and prophets and stuff, they might have understood this. But so many people just put it as modesty. So it's not just about women that need to have modesty, but it's also men that need to have modesty. And so many people just say, oh, it's all about the women, it's all about the women. But no, the Bible doesn't teach that it's all about women. It teaches that it's about everyone. Something we should consider is the story of Noah's Ark. When Noah was found to be naked by his sons, and his two sons turned backwards and walked in and covered their father, right? It doesn't mean that he was 100% naked. We don't know how much he was not wearing, because it doesn't say that he was that drunk that he passed out. A lot of people will imply that, but it doesn't. But it says that, when he woke up, he was no longer drunk. So Noah's one son was cursed because he didn't regard the nakedness and realize that that was something that was inappropriate for him to look at. But the two other boys did, and those were men with men. And so we should realize that even with men, there's a modesty that is shown in the Bible. So while the women should dress modestly, which most don't do that anymore, the men also should dress modestly. It shouldn't be about drawing people's attention to your bodies. So, this handsome young man here, I don't need to carry a stick with me to beat off all the women because I dress more modestly. I think that's funny. I hope you do too. Anyways, I don't want somebody to look at me for how I look. I want somebody to look at me and think about me for what I think, for my values, and for how I contribute to the world, and in the proclamation of God's gospel as well. These are the things that I want people to recognize. I don't want people to look at me and judge me based on my looks, on my appearance. The Bible teaches against this. So now I want to bring this to the Bible even more closely. Why do I dress the way I do? Well, if anybody's watched any of my videos, I'm always saying that we should be the gospel lived out before others. That's what Jesus wants. We're supposed to be in everything that we do, whether it's in our work, whether it's in how we eat, whether it's in how we treat others, how we treat the earth. Are we stewards of the earth? Do we wreck the earth? Are we working to try to bring health and restoration to it? Are we trying to bring health and restoration to people in their physical needs as well as their spiritual needs? We are to be a living testimony. We are to be the testimony of Jesus. And that is showing that God's law is written in our hearts and in our minds, whether we've written it there ourselves or whether God has imprinted it on us already, right? Part of the old covenant and the new covenant. And I'll always tell people, we come to God in the old covenant first, and as we learn of him, we transition into the new covenant. A lot of people have a lot of issue with that. They want to accept the new covenant right away without the old covenant. But the Bible plainly teaches that that's impossible. You can't give yourself to God until you know God, because why would you do that? First you get to know him. So you're justified from the first stage, and then you're justified at the end stage, and it's a progression. So now let me talk about my suspenders. You know, I believe that God the Father is the head. The Bible teaches that. Jesus teaches that. That Jesus does everything that the Father wants him to do. And if we yoke up with Christ, Jesus is only going to do everything the Father wants him to do. We only do everything the Father wants him to do. So if we say God is the head, and then we're yoked, because the yoke is like here, right? And it goes across the shoulders on a pair of oxen. So if Jesus has the one side and I have the other side, it's Jesus that covers us with his righteousness. And it is our choice whether or not we keep on that righteousness or not. Right? We can choose not to follow God, or we can choose to follow God. But when we work with him, we work together. So all our clothes, which represents Christ's righteousness, covers us. And it's carried together, but it's all because we're following the head, which is God the Father. So that spiritual example, for most people, will be like, oh, I don't know about that. But think about this too. God wants us to be wholly covered with Christ's righteousness, not partially covered. So while our face and our hands are the only things that are really not covered, everything else is to be. We're not to wear clothes that have holes in it or that are torn, because Christ's robe is without spot or wrinkle or stain. It has no holes, it has no rips, it has no tears. It's perfect. It's only our righteousness that is stained and full of holes and has all these different things. So not only do I wear clothes without holes, without tears and stuff like that, I believe that the long sleeves is representative of Christ's righteousness, and that we need to be fully covered with it, not just partially covered with it. And that's why, even in our health, it is affected by how we dress. You know, if I pull up my sleeve, this arm becomes cold. If we become cold to Christ, what happens? That means we're drawing away from him. So the spiritual significance of it all points to the health significance of it, which also teaches people about what we believe in the gospel, that we believe that the gospel of Christ covers us all. We're not to wear things that draw any attention to ourselves. We're to dress simply, tastefully, in a manner that's not showing lack of care. Now, maybe I might have some clothes that maybe, they're not too bad, that might be a little wrinkly, and that's something that I need to iron out, isn't it? That's really funny. But all in all, even in the way we dress, is a testament as to what the Bible is teaching us, teaching others about the gospel of Christ in relation to salvation. It's my prayer that you might take these things and think about them and ask yourself, does God care about how we dress? In the Old Testament, we see that He did. He gave a specific dress to the priests. We're all called to be priests today. Therefore, let us put on the robes of Christ's righteousness, and let it be shown that we believe that we can wear them. I believe that we're coming to a time of primitive godliness, when we'll look back and we'll see through all the ages of the entire history of the earth, everybody dressed in a manner that was modest. And I believe that God's children will be looking at the Bible and not just seeing the words of the book, but looking for the hidden gems that are there. Why did God say that? Why did God want people dressed a certain way? Don't just read to have a knowledge. Read to understand what God's will is for you.